Hello, hello. We are just now jumping in. Let me go ahead and make sure that we're all set up. This is going to be a more chill stream. Nice and relaxed. The first phase is going to be mostly dealing with scuff from the previous stream. Wanted to make sure that everything here actually lines up nice and good. And once that's figured out, we can move on to actual D&D map making shenanigans. Hope everyone's doing well. Anyone in the chat, since we're dealing with all that scuff and nonsense, feel free to let me know if you find an issue with the sound or anything of that nature. Right now, I'm just making sure that I'm getting chats within both streams are live. Okay, it seems like everything is going well. The next thing I gotta do is double check, because I've been having a lot of follows on Twitch that haven't been updating, unfortunately, on the stream side. And I'm trying to figure that out, so I'm gonna see what I can do there. I know we started the stream and we wanted to get right into map making, but I just want to get this out of the way ahead of time, and the only way for me to really get this figured out is to actually get on stream and take a look at some settings. So sorry to have maybe deceived a few of the people coming in about D&D map making. We will get to that. I just need to double check some of these other issues first. Hey, Major Echo, good to see you. I saw you looking forward to some map making streams, and we will get to that. Just need to check some of this items here. I saw you following on Twitch, and I'm trying to get that alert. There we go. So we have that alert going in. The issue is that I'm not getting you on my last follower. Huh. That is remarkable, but the alerts are certainly working. I did actually get you. So what I need is a different one. Where are you? Oh, I'm sorry, man. I thought I linked my Twitter on the Discord server. I hope that had the Twitch link, but I can double check. There you go. There you go. Okay, now we have some actual updates on our notifications here. No worries. All right, we got that set up. I'll have to update this on my other screens, but looks like we're getting the appropriate latest follow here. I also had a top bribe. I'm gonna go ahead and just drop that down, since I'm not really doing much in terms of donations. That was a fake one just for testing anyway. So we're going ahead with that one. We got that scuff in. I see the YouTube is up. I see the Twitch is up. So I'm pretty satisfied with what we have now. Perfect. So without further ado, we can actually move on to looking at the D&D's aspects of it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lower the music volume a little bit, because it's gonna be a bit more relaxing. It's gonna be a bit more thoughtful, a bit more explicit, or I guess I should say planned or intentional on the decisions we're making. And what I want to do is take it slow and narrate, explain some of the creative process that goes into creating a dungeon. So to give everyone who's watching some context, just to train my own map making skills, because you always want to fine tune your craft in that way, and to help, give us a theme. What I want to do is show anyone who wants to be a dungeon master for Dungeons and Dragons that it's feasible, and it's not the mountain climb that you might think it is in order to set up a dungeon and make encounters and set up even a basic story in order to go along with it. So we're going to be focusing on this series on making a big dungeon. I don't know exactly if we're going to get to every single floor. We're trying to do 100 floor dungeons. This stream we're doing the first floor because we are sort of gearing this towards people who are interested in maybe becoming dungeon masters, or people who are introducing people into Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. We're going to be a bit more introductory as we go along, so I'll try to be explaining some of the basics of D&D, especially as we go to the first few floors, because what you're going to want to do is develop a toolbox as a dungeon master of different features, narratives, and themes, and so on, that you can then build a foundation with for your map making. And that's going to help you create more maps in the future. It's going to help you in tweaking themes and reusing them, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you have to make a new map for a new location. If you're making like a mansion or a dungeon or any field of some kind, you'll have a common toolbox that you can use. And so in our first challenge for dungeon creation, what we want to do is we want to start by just having a basic plan of what we want to introduce ultimately you'll want a plan for every floor, but for us, we're going to want to start with just the first floor or two, in order to help give us understanding of what we want to fit into this dungeon, how long a dungeon should be, how big the floor should be, and what kind of features should be present in that dungeon, in order to give the adventurers who's going to be going into that dungeon a sense of progression and a sense of learning, so that you're not overwhelming them with junk. Now, before we get into actual setting up of assets and actually creating a board on a grid, a few things that I want to mention. I went ahead, we're going to be using Roll20 for all of our map making, just because I think Roll20 is probably the fastest way to get started. And I think it's probably one of the more common avenues for new and aspiring dungeon masters and people interested in tabletop RPGs in general. So we're using this as a basis that it helps you guys if you guys want to create a campaign or a map for your own friends. You'll probably be doing it on Roll20. There are of course many other tools that are really good for creating maps and for setting up tabletop RPGs like Map Tool and things like that. But we're going to use Roll20 because I think it's the most straightforward, and it's very easy to get a bunch of people together on a Roll20 and then just create those settings, create that world there. In the meantime, you'll notice at the bottom, I have downloaded a bunch of existing assets for the map creation. I've used a map asset pack that has been wonderfully curated by the Forgotten Adventures realm. I will be posting a link in the description as well as in the chat later, so that people who are interested in getting the actual map icons, the textures, the little walls and things like that we're going to be using, you'll be able to go to the Forgotten Adventures website in order to download it. It's all free. Everything that I've downloaded here is free, and they are the ones that deserve all the credit for actually creating the art that we're going to be using for this and future streams. While I fancy myself a dungeon designer and a dungeon master, I would not say that I have a knack for actual art in terms of like drawing and painting and stuff like that. So I am humbly using their creations to support the sort of dungeon design, and so that's why you see that on the bottom. And I think with all those caveats, we're going to go ahead and get started with some of the first steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a quick notepad file so that we can maybe list the themes that we want for our dungeon for this floor. We can consider what we want to include. We can consider what our ultimate goals are. So we have floor 1. We have some themes, and we're going to involve some mechanics that we want to make sure that the players encounter, because for our first few floors, we're going to be primarily focused on setting up a general tone for the adventure and teaching the players about the game, because we're making an assumption here that the players are going to be relatively new to the Dungeons and Dragons experience. And we're going to try to make things global, because this is going to be a map that I'm making for any party. So we're not going to make any assumptions about whether any players have any certain weapons, or if any players are of a certain class or a certain race. We're going to try our best to make a dungeon that is global, that you can use in any setting, that you can use with any group. So, what are we going to target for our themes? I think that because we're starting things off, we're going to go ahead and do something that is more, I don't want to say generic, but I think a bit more straightforward, a bit more simple in its design. So we're looking at like basic catacombs or burial ground for this dungeon. And the reason why we're doing something like this for our first few themes is because I want to entertain the idea that the first few floors are not inherently explicitly dangerous. They may have been explored many times by adventurers and people that may be in that setting in the past. So it kind of makes sense that there's already sort of civilized structures that exist. Maybe it's a catacomb, maybe it's a burial ground that you hold your dead. This gives you a lot of room for creating undead creatures. Alternatively, we could always do something like a mining shaft or something of that nature to help give you an idea of a narrative of what was this floor designed for before it became this sort of dungeon area. And for example, mining shaft might give us the opportunity to add things like environmental hazards, because you might have I don't even want to say hazards, but maybe features like having a mining cart around that you can move around, or if there are shafts that have been dug, maybe there's the potential for rock slides and things like that. This is just to help give us some ideas in our head of what we're going to want to eventually include. So here's some ideas of themes that we can add. And the other thing we're going to want to focus is the mechanics. Now, what I did for understanding the mechanics that we want to include is I went ahead and took a look at the D&D basic rules. Because again, we're making an assumption that our players are going to be fairly new to D&D. And so the basic rules is probably going to be what you want to teach your players about first, is where you're going to want to predominantly feature first. And the basic rules will help give you the best understanding for how to design your toolkit of DM features that will then form the basis for any advanced little bits that you add in future floors. So even if you are an experienced DM, I would recommend going into your basic rules. It's all available, again, for free. I'm actually going to put a link of the PDF in the chat right now for anyone interested and wants to follow along. But it's all available for free on this site. And we're going to be using this to give us an understanding of what Wizards of the Coast thinks are the core critical rules that we want to worry about, and also what we want to focus on when designing our initial mechanics. So a lot of this stuff is going to sound straightforward, but you bear with me. We're going to make some basic building blocks, and then we can expand from that. So if we go to page 60 of our basic rules, we have our sort of original first chapter on in terms of actually playing the game. It talks about using your ability scores, which is a representation of how good your character is at certain core aspects, like how strong they are, how tough they are, how smart they are, and things like that. And it explains how the modifiers work and whether you get advantage or disadvantage on any particular check on an ability score, proficiency bonuses, and things like that. So, the mechanics we're going to be focusing on are really, really simple stuff that is present within these basic rules. So, what are we looking at? We're looking at using ability scores, or I'll say ability checks. And this also applies to skill checks, as well as saving throws. We also can help give an understanding of what proficiency is. Is that you spelling it? Yes. What is proficiency? And this could apply to things like armor and weapons, as well as tools. And these are ways for you to understand what it means to be proficient with something versus not proficient. Moving on in the basic rules, and we're going to list a lot of the mechanics from the basic rules, but because the core rules are fairly dense, it's very possible that we're not going to cover everything in these basic rules on the first floor. It may take more than one floor in order to cover all the things that we kind of want. So see, for example, we may not have a whole lot in terms of combat in the first floor, just because we want to make sure that we have room to teach everything in the other floors. And if we have to split our teach of the game, our mechanics in the dungeon, it makes sense to save combat for when we go deeper into the dungeon and there's more risk of creatures or monsters that might be lurking there that would not have been cleared out by civilization in the past. For a narrative reason, you might want to hold off on combat, or you might want to include combat early if you think that you're going to be focusing on that. I'm listing all the mechanics that I think is going to be important because I want this to be a sort of dungeon that kind of uses a little bit of everything so that people are not left out. But of course, depending on the kind of campaign you're running, if you think that you are in a position, oh, Velixion, thanks so much for the follow. Yeah, exactly, Major. We're going to be doing some of the tutorial floors that teach mechanics, how they work, and really help the players understand what their character sheet tells them and how to read that and give them the sort of literacy that it means. Because if you don't do something like that and you try to give them direct challenges ahead of time without really explaining the core of what things mean, you'll end up seeing scenarios, and I've had this a lot, you'll end up seeing scenarios where players will not have the opportunity to really sink in on the core of things. And a common example I'll hear is, for example, oh, do I roll a D20 for this? One thing that you'll notice is that for anything like ability checks, skill checks, saving throws, attack rolls, things like that, you're almost always rolling a 20-sided dice. And when you don't, it seems sort of counterintuitive, but when you don't take the time to really drill in that specific feature of how checks and throws and rolls like that work, your players may not make the connection that whenever you're determining success or failure, you're always checking using a 20-sided dice. And so you'll be asked a lot, what dice do I roll for this? And one of the things that we're going to be trying to do here is to help teach organically players that information without getting to the point where they don't have to ask for it. They kind of already know at that point. So we're talking about ability checks, we're talking about proficiency checks. We also had listed here advantage and disadvantage, and what that means. Moving on further, we have the skill contests is being listed here. So this is when instead, having a DC for a particular task versus rolling for DC is the way that I'll refer to it. And so that's talking about, like, if there's a door that's in the way and you want to break it down, the door will have a certain toughness to it that sort of determines how hard it is to break it down, and it's fixed. Whereas if you're trying to push someone else out of the way, they may roll a skill check to resist you, and then you are both rolling instead of just the player rolling for a certain against a fixed difficulty class. And so we'll be able to see if we can showcase that feature in here. Let's see. And then if we look at the rest of these rules, they just talk about the different ability scores and what they mean. This is interesting, you know. What do different abilities / skills mean? This is a wide topic. I don't know how much of this we're going to cover. I'm going to put a question mark here because this one is something that might need to be covered during character creation, or will have to be something that is just focused on as you go one by one through different floors with different themes. So for example, you might be in a situation where you're doing a stealth focused floor where you're just trying to hide and get behind, you know, sneak past monsters or sneak past methods of detection. And in that scenario, you'll be focusing a lot on you know, stealth and investigation and perception and things like that, and that'll help you understand what those specific abilities and those specific skills mean. That might be the scenario that you'll want to be looking for when you're talking about this particular category. This category is really dense to add to a first floor, in my opinion. So I'm gonna put this down here because we're gonna want to eventually cover it, but this might not be a first floor thing. And that covers a lot of these pages because it talks about the different things. It talks about saving throws. Let's see. We also talk about travel pace / time. And this talks about like rounds versus minutes versus hours. And a round is 6 seconds typically in game time. Round. Oh wait, sorry. 1 round equals 6 seconds. And this will matter most of the time when you're in combat, but depending on any situation where time is of the essence, it's good to understand how you will travel and how that impacts the total time there is in a day, especially when it comes to things like I'm going to say character maintenance. And this includes things like food, water, and rest, which ties into sort of the time that it's taking to do certain things. And this is a scenario where you might end up looking at the base rules, and I'm just giving a sort of heads up. I've been doing my best to not think too hard about the design of this dungeon until we started the stream, because I really wanted to demonstrate how you sort of go from this process starting from scratch. If you're like a new DM and you're just starting and you say, I want to build a dungeon. And so I'm trying to start from scratch here. I'm not trying to come in with a bunch of different themes at once. So 1 round is basically it's 6 seconds, and every character has a chance to act in that 1 round. So there's 1 round. 1 round is 1 turn for every character. Every character has a turn in which they do actions. They can attack and move and maybe use an item that they have or interact with the world in some way. And that's their turn. And then every character has a turn, and that represents 1 round. Every character has done their stuff, and it's been 6 seconds. That'll usually matter in combat, but sometimes it'll matter in other situations. And it also helps give you an idea of just how long things have been and how long certain things take. So for example, if you're trying to pick a lock, and picking a lock says it takes, a minute to pick a lock, it's good to know that means that it's taking 10 rounds to pick that lock. So if you try to pick a lock during combat, it takes a long time. depending on the lock you're trying to pick and how long it takes. There might be a lock that you decide is very easy to pick and it takes only 1 or 2 rounds. But having that easy way to understand it will help for that. So we have character maintenance here, and let's see. Just moving down here, we have activity while traveling. I'm going to skip on the traveling section right now, mostly because since we're dealing with this dungeon, which is a single place that you just go down and up floors, doing long-term travel will probably be less efficient, or probably be less important, I should say, in this scenario, because it's not like you're traveling from one location to another, going many, many miles in an hour or over the course of several days. So in that situation, I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. Perhaps when you get into a scenario where you've gone several floors deep into a dungeon, and you imagine that it might take you hours or more to, go from the 20th floor of a dungeon all the way back to the surface level, or from the surface level all the way back down to the 20th level. In those scenarios, you may want to revisit what it means to have a travel pace and what travel pace gives you, and what are the trade-offs that you get from traveling at a certain pace versus not. But for now, since we're talking about just the first few floors, travel pace is going to be irrelevant in this case, unless you're taking your base of operations is very far away from the entrance to the dungeon. But right now, I'm not really worried about anywhere outside the dungeon. I'm just worried about creating the dungeon. We're going to skip on traveling and activity while traveling for now. So we're just going through all these lists, noticing threats, suffocating, the environment, things like that, falling. Oh yeah, we're talking about environmental hazards. So we can put environmental hazards here. And this includes falling, suffocating, and drowning. What else do we have here? Vision / light. And what it means to be bright light versus dim light versus darkness. And this will matter a lot if you are planning to make sort of dark, dense, creepy environments for your dungeon, and especially if you have a party that has a blend of characters that have dark vision versus not having dark vision, then the matter of whether something is lit or not will matter a lot. And of course, the extent to which that matter is going to differ depending on the party that you have. Let's see. We have social interaction. This includes role-playing. Oops, I'm bad at typing. Role-playing and NPC attitude, which is either going to be friendly, indifferent, or hostile. And I'm going to go only this far when it comes to social interactions because, like I said, in the first few floors, we're probably not going to encounter a whole lot in terms of NPCs, or at least I'm not planning on it. So that these social interactions will be few and far between. It'll mostly depend on whether players want to interact socially with any creatures, monsters that they encounter. Some characters will want to avoid combat if possible, and so it'll be important in some scenarios to at least understand this concept. And then, yes, resting. So I mentioned in food character maintenance, food, water, and rest, and I'm also want to mention short rest versus long resting versus downtime, which is going to be important. Downtime is basically when you spend several days or more outside of the dungeon doing something specific, whether it comes to a profession or training or recovering from long-term injuries and things like that. And this may also apply to things like how do hit dice work and things like that. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And then finally, I would say we go into combat. So we have combat, which is a whole other thing that I think I'm going to be focusing in the later time. But we have enough to get started right now. We have some basic themes that we want to work on. We have some basic mechanics that we'll want to introduce. And now what we want to do is we want to go to our map. And instead of placing something right away in terms of, art and icons and things like that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some basic blueprinting and just draw stuff. We're just going to draw stuff on the map and help give us inspiration of how we want to lay out our first dungeon floor and the kind of actual events and challenges and encounters that we're going to want to introduce in this floor. And an encounter, at its core, I'm going to try to do my best to combine a theme with a mechanic in order to give a meaningful reason to teach these abilities, to teach these features to the players. So what I'm going to do is, now we're going on to the technical aspect of how to use Roll20. If you want to blueprint your dungeon, I would recommend going in and hitting your GM info overlay here. You'll notice that on this second icon on the top left corner, it determines basically whenever you add images or draw on it or do anything on it, you are impacting one of three layers. The map and background layer is where you draw your map and background, and these usually aren't manipulated by anyone. Then there's your objects and tokens. These are going to be your items these are going to be your tokens that have stats. So these are like your player characters, your NPCs, maybe special items like barricades that need to be destroyed and things like that. You might want to give those things stats, and objects and tokens allow you to do that. And then the GM info overlay is similar to objects and tokens, except only the GM or the dungeon master is going to actually see what we do in the GM info overlay. And so based on that, we're going to go ahead and do this so that when we start drawing things, and we can draw something using our freehand, we'll be able to do all this without impacting the other layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw what I imagine we want to introduce. Because this is the first floor, we're going to make things pretty straightforward, not make things terribly complicated. And I'll just make notes of where I want cool things to happen, whether they're traps or obstacles that the player characters must encounter, or treasure that will teach them certain things, or monsters that they have to fight. We're just going to draw it all out. I'm not going to care too much about the scale, because right now you'll notice there's a certain grid. Every grid here is 5 feet by 5 feet. And a single character is going to take up 1 square. And so, of course, depending on how big you want that your dungeon to be, you may want to change the size of your map. I'm not worried about that right now, because I'm always going to be able to scale this stuff later. So let's go ahead and do some drawing. The first thing I'll do is I'll draw the entrance. To make things simple, I think I'll just draw the entrance at the bottom. We'll get something like this going on. I'm going to get a little corridor here. And we're going to have an opening. And I think before I have the opening, I'm going to have a door here. So we're going to have a door here, and we're going to say that this door is barred. So it's blocked in. Or actually, I'll just say it's locked. And I think we have text here. Yes, we do. So locked. And so this means that we can use either a, what is it called? I believe it's sleight of hand, or rather thieves tools, or athletics, in order to deal with this locked door. And so what this means is we're going to go ahead and teach our characters about certain things. So just by introducing this, what are we teaching? Well, we're teaching about ability checks. We're teaching about a skill check specifically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this here to demonstrate that this has been implemented at least once in our dungeon, so that people have a chance to experience this and understand what it means. So we know we're talking about skill checks here. We're also demonstrating your ability to use a tool. Some people might have proficiencies with these tools in order to pick a lock. I may also actually update this and include the investigation. Actually, if I do something like this, and again, it depends on how you want to handle this, but just to try to make things super dense and demonstrate how you can teach a lot of things at once, I'm going to go ahead and change things up a bit. So instead of athletics, in a lot of situations, athletics or using a skill check is talking about specific human war. That's true. With Spell Sniper and Eldritch Spear, you get a huge feat. But a lot of times it's going to matter if you have like certain speeds that you're traveling through. But yeah, not really worried about how far people are when you've got crazy range. But instead of athletics, I'm going to go with pure strength here. To demonstrate that there's not really a particular skill or training you're doing when it comes to breaking down a door. You're just using your raw ability. So this is teaching us, first off, how rolls work in general. You've got your, you roll your d20, you add the appropriate bonus, and you perform that. It's also teaching you about the difference between an ability check and a skill check, whereas your strength is using your raw ability score. The investigation, to say find the key under the mat, is going to help you understand what it means to have a skill versus using a raw ability. And then optionally using the Thieves tools will help you understand what tools are available. And for each of these, I'm going to go ahead and use a particular difficulty class, which helps us understand what a root DC is. So let's say for Thieves tools, let's say this is a DC 11 skill check. So it's a little harder than average to pick this lock, but not terribly difficult. For strength, I'm going to go ahead and say this is a DC of, let's say 9. It's a little easier to break this door than to pick the lock. The door is very flimsy. And I'm going to say the investigation check is going to be actually really simple. The DC is going to be really DC 5. It's going to be super easy to just look under the mat and see, oh, there's a key in here. And that'll be kind of a nice little fun thing that we can throw in. So we're going to go ahead and just add a little mat here. So we've gotten a lot of stuff to teach at once, which is very nice for us. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and expand on this. How do you want to expand? So let's suppose that we're doing a loop. So we're going to go ahead and move around this way, as if there's like a big opening here. And I'm just doing very rough drawings. When we actually handle the map, it'll look a little bit different than our blueprint. And then we're going to go ahead and split things off here, because who doesn't like forks in the road? And then these guys will probably combine up at some point here in order to have some other barrier. Then let's go ahead and say we add a long corridor here that goes into a corner. And then we have a huge room over here that acts as a major staging ground for whatever operations these dungeons used to have. And then let's say that there are stairs here. And we're pretty straightforward on that. And it gives us a basic blueprint. And so looking at this, if I were to bring in just bring in any token that I have, let's actually look through some of the tokens that I might have in terms of little icons. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and look through my map assets to grab a quick sample of of a creature that might be 5 feet by 5 feet. So we get to see an icon and we can see what it looks like as in terms of scale. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to objects and tokens. I'm going to grab a corpse here. Let's see what we got. All right. We're just going to throw that sucker down. All right, here's our guy. And this is a 5 foot by 5 foot guy. So you can see that it's fairly small, especially here. I think I want this to be a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look. You have your list of maps here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this here. Oh, well, actually, you can't even see. Can you see that? Oh, yeah, you can. Perfect. And then I'm going to choose what I want to increase this by. Right now, it's 25 squares by 25 squares. I'm going to increase it a little bit. I'm going to increase it to 35 on each side. Actually, I'm going to make it wider, but not much taller. So it's going to be 35 by 25 like that. And that will give me the room that I need to give ourselves a bigger section here. So we might do, oops, I want that freehand. Do something like this. Oops, this is in the map and token section. So I'm just going to change the layer here to GM layer. I'm not too worried about all these walls because I'm just using this to understand what the basic formula is going to be. Okay. So actually, I think I'm going to take the stairs. I'm going to move them here because I have some plans for... Is this working? I'm on the GM now, right? Let me just get a little bit closer. There you go. Perfect. I'll put the stairs down here. Okay. So this makes things a little bit lighter or a little bit brighter. So a few other notes I'm going to add here. I'm going to say that for this section, it is dark, completely dark in this section. And what I want to do is I want to give a quick description of these just so I understand what we're looking at. So this is going to be sort of a burial ground. And a, we'll say it's maybe a little cursed in this scenario. Whereas this area, where's my text? There it is. Maybe a abandoned mining operation. Living quarters. Maybe it would be around here. I'll say it's temporary. And this will help give us an idea of what we might want to include here, just to have a basic map. And this would be sort of a sort of safety shaft within here. For a safety shaft, you probably want something. So now this is giving us a bit more understanding of thematically how we want to organize something. See, having a safety shaft this narrow is probably not that meaningful. So it might make sense to do something cool here to help solidify why this is a safety shaft later. And this could be a special feature that we include. So maybe this is maybe cluttered. Here. So, zooming out quite a bit more than I needed to. Dark burial ground curse. So we've taught about some basic rules here. So what we're going to want is to see what else we want to teach in our sections here. We have our efficiency checks based on our armor and weapons. That sort of will tie into combat. So we may skip those for now. Saving throws might be relevant here. But I may not include that later. Let's see. Well, this is definitely going to be teaching us about vision and light in this scenario. So we're going to be going ahead and covering that in this section here, which is going to be talking about whether there's bright light, there's dim light, and there's darkness. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus some sections here, which is dim light, say from faint to gems, faint fluorescent. And then I will have bright light here from lanterns, say. So that the players will be able to see what it means to have light versus bright, dim, and dark environments in each case. And this will be sort of a precursor to the future floors. Who lit these lanterns? Because this place should have been abandoned. And that might give players a bit of a warning about what might be facing them in the second floor, like, say, monsters that are doing combat. So, what I'm going to do is we're going to want to add some sort of hazard here. Let's say we added some... I actually don't know if I want to use the burial ground here, because the burial ground... See, now we're having a chance to understand what kind of themes we want to include and what kind of mechanics we want to add. We can think more about whether it makes sense to have certain features in certain sections of our dungeon. And right now, what I want to teach is I want to teach things like how falling works, suffocating and drowning, and how maybe saving throws work. That's sort of what I'm looking for right now. And right now, there doesn't seem to be a lot of reasons for me to do that in a burial ground. I could, for example, do something like a dug up graves that characters may fall into and things like that. But it seems a little contrived. It's very easy for players to not notice that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change things up a little bit. And instead of having a burial ground that's cursed, I'm going to have a sort of... I'm still going to keep the burial ground, but I'm going to do something like a sarcophagi thing above Round's burial, and I'm going to say that it's trapped in this scenario. And so here's what will happen. I'm going to add a few sarcophagi here. So you might have like a few here, and maybe one here, and maybe one here, and one here. And some of these will be trapped, and will make it interesting is that because it's dark, players may have disadvantage on trying to identify or disable the traps that are dealing with the sarcophagi here. And the trapped will allow us to demonstrate how saving throws works, as well as potentially how you lose HP and things like that. We have that. We have a safety shaft, which is cluttered. This might help teach us things about, and I haven't actually covered this in here, but there is a concept of difficult terrain. We'll have a chance to mention that here. Did I? Okay, there we go. I'm actually going to add that here. Travel pace time. I'm going to add difficult terrain. And there we go. So we kind of have an idea of the themes we want to include. We have a rough idea of the blueprint that we want. And we're going to go ahead and actually start drawing the map now. So what I like to do first off is to actually create a basis for our floor. Since this is the very beginning, I'm going to do something like a dirty stone as our roots texture. I'm just going to drop those everywhere. So what I did ahead of time is upload a lot of the images from the Forgotten Adventures map pack into the library on Roll20. You don't have to do this. You can import the images directly from your hard drive, but importing them into your library in Roll20 makes it a little bit easier to search for things and allows you to organize things a little bit better. So it's a trade-off on whether or not you think it's worth it. But let's go ahead and just look for some of this stuff. I'm just looking through some of my images to see if there's a structure that I like a lot. And I kind of like, where was it? I kind of like this one. We're gonna take this and actually we're gonna move away from our GM layer. We're gonna move to the background layer because we're actually making the map now. Here we go. And since this is a 30 by 25, I'm gonna make this a 5 by 5. And we're just gonna go ahead and just start filling up this area. And I'm going to think later on about how I want to actually, if I want to make any of these floor textures different in certain scenarios. But right now I'm just going to be filling this in. So we have a working base. Now looking at some of these other things, it would make sense that our staircase is a bit more structures. It's kind of like stairs that you're going into. Let me do something that's more stony. And let me see if I can find something a bit more structured. Something like this. Oops. Do something like this. I'm gonna make this a bit smaller. Did it work? There you go. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and add, do we want anything different? We want to add stairs for sure. Now I did upload a lot of stuff into this library, so sometimes it takes a little bit of time to find appropriate to get all the images that we care. And you know what? I want this overlay since we already are using stuff. There you go. And here's a quick tip. If you are trying to fit a map icon and you don't want to have it match exactly with the grid, you can hold Alt and it will allow you to sort of freely place it anywhere within the map. It doesn't have to be perfectly snapped to grid. I'm gonna go ahead and do something like this. So this gives us the image of going, actually, this is the image of going up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip these around. I'm gonna do something like this. There we go. So this gives us the image of going actually down the stairs to get to this area. And then I'm going to add doormat. There's some nice things here. I'm going to try to find one that is, yeah, nice and red. I'm going to say big keep out sign. Like this. And this will have a key hidden based on this note here. I'm going to add a door. And we're going to make this a wooden door. And we want it to be pretty flimsy because we think it should be pretty easy to destroy. These doors are not that, they don't look that flimsy. Let's do something else. I'm gonna look for a wooden plank. Something that's more makeshift that could feasibly look like a door. Here's something. Yep, this looks much nicer, more decrepit. I'm going to make this appear much more thin. I'm going to stretch it here. Again, you can use Alt to stretch things instead of having it be based, snapping specifically to the grid. I'm going to have it snap a little bit beyond the grid. It's going to look like this. There you go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing the actual walls. Dungeon wall. We're going to see what we get. We want something straight. We're going to use this as a basis. Yeah, I'm going to say something like this. Okay, and we want some curves. And using Alt to shift the dimensions in exactly the ways that you want is going to help fill in how we want to do this very nicely. So we want this. Oops. That doesn't seem quite right. I'm gonna bring it back like that, and I'm gonna rotate it a little bit. There you go. This one's a bit more of a straightaway. We'll do something like this. I'm gonna make this a straightaway for. I'm gonna use another one. I want this to be a straightaway for a bit longer than what was actually drawn here. So I'm gonna do something like this, and we're gonna, again, I'll be updating our maps as we go along, because we don't want to be married to how we drew this. It was supposed to be just a very rough blueprint. We're gonna do another corner here. Like so. Oops. Let me try to make this an actual straightaway, like that. And then I'm gonna have a very small corner here to help write things in a slightly better position. Something like this. Actually, I want something like this. Yeah, there we go. Then we have a straightaway going this way. Too small. There you go. Yeah, I'm gonna make this a little bit narrower. Oops, there we go. And we do use our friend copy paste. Do we have any sharp corners that we can use here? We do, we have this. But it's not, no, it's not quite what we're looking for. That's okay. I'm gonna take this though, just to change the pattern a little bit. Oops. We're gonna end it here, so we got another straightaway going. in this direction. And this is going to be a straight corner, so we're just going to go ahead and take this. Let's see. Actually, I kind of... It's smaller like that. Rotate it like this. There we go. And we're going to stop that here and build the rest of this sort of pathway here. Yep. There we go. Yeah, right around here. And let's see if we can make this. I'm going to make this wall a little bit thicker just so that we have a more appropriate support for the difference between this room and the room to the right. Going this way, we're going to turn that into a corner. We're going to use a bigger corner. Yeah, right. Oh, this is... That's definitely too... There you go. This. I'm going to stretch this a little bit so it fits the square. And you know what? While I'm here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change my grid. And that will let me, I think, that's the grid. That's going to help me see a bit more clearly where the grid lies. There you go. Actually, I feel like it didn't help that much. I think I want to increase the opacity instead. Increase the opacity. There we go. Now we can easily see where the grid lies. That way there's no ambiguities for where player characters should be allowed to be, if necessary. We all know that, you know, they got these two squares, they got this square here, and so on. No, that's okay. This is one of those creative streams where you kind of just vibe and lurk and chill and everything. So don't feel too stressed about like responding or actively engaging or asking questions and stuff. This is mostly just a relaxing stream while I go through the process. And if anything is confusing, feel free to ask. But it sounds a lot like you're kind of, you know, familiar with D&D already, so a lot of this stuff is probably already straightforward. And you're just, you're free to just enjoy the process. Let's see. And then here, we're going to go ahead with more narrow sections. Just like that. And I'm going to copy this. And put that here. Because good artists copy paste. No, they don't really, but I do. Let's look at what we got so far. Oh, I should add this separation here. So now this separation is sort of meaningless right now. I'm probably going to replace the separation with something a bit more meaningful in the future. But I'm going to try to I'm gonna think on that in the back of my mind while I finish the rest of these. There should be a door here somewhere. I think the door is gonna be around here. So let's start. I'm going to need more floor here. And I'm gonna add an end piece here. These things should definitely be in front of it. There you go. That looks appropriate. Now, I need to shorten this curve, however. Is there a way to do a lesser corner? It's facing in a way that's a little bit problematic for the angle that I want. I'm going to think a little bit about this. Never had a chance to play until recently? Yeah, that's understandable. The D&D requires a significant commitment from everyone involved. It's kind of hard to find people who are willing to make that commitment, especially in the long term, beyond like your very short one session escapades. But I'm glad you had a chance to play it recently. How did it go? What if I just did a small dungeon straight and just made the curve myself? Is probably what I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna do a very small dungeon straight here. Yeah, I know that feeling. You definitely you get into the forever DM mode, where someone is the one who shows enough interest to like be the DM, and then like everyone just like, oh great, you're the DM forever, right? You're the one who's willing to make all the maps and all that stuff, and then you're the forever DM. I mostly joke, but it's still quite a good time. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and just curve this out manually. And again, I'm using Alt a lot in order to be more exact with how I want to rotate these pieces. I'm gonna make it a little bit like so. Probably don't need that. Thursdays, play tabletop games. Hey, D&D on Tabletop Simulator is very interesting. I don't know if Tabletop Simulator is the best place for D&D. I don't want to criticize Tabletop Simulator. It's definitely a game I'd recommend anyone who's even remotely interested in tabletop games should definitely get a copy of. But because of just how freeform it is, you gotta be you kind of got to be really committed to like knowing D&D to use that software. I am glad to hear about your new D&D your new DM, D&D Beyond, and using Owlbear for the maps. Oh, okay, the Essentials campaign. That's pretty good. Eventually, what I'll want to do is I'll want to do write-ups for these floors that give you a better description of like okay, here is basically straight, so I'm gonna use the straight sections. I'll eventually want to include write-ups for all these things like DCs, like you would like how you would see a write-up for the Essentials Kit campaign. Eventually, I'm going to include something like that so that people who want to take these maps and use it in their own game can do so, and they can download the write-up as well. They can just read it and go through without having to follow through with everything else. Okay. And this is definitely an actual corner that I want here. Something like this. There we go. And for this one, I'm going to do very small corners that get dug out. Because it's supposed to be sort of this abandoned mining area. I have a lot of little divots here. I'm going to want an ending piece here. There you go. That's better. Doing something a bit more wishy-washy in this section. And we'll do a straightaway here. Okay, then I want some more wishy-washy in this section. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do a divot inside or outside first, and then cycle with it inside. Something like this. Let's do this and put this in the front. Yeah. We'll do a straightaway here. And a small little bit to close this off. Too small. There we go. So now what we want, we're gonna want a door here. Or some sort of closing in this section. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and make a door here. Or an opening. Is there let me see if there's opening sections in the library. Find something like that. That would be pretty neat. Nope, not really. A lot of trapdoors here. I might want to consider. Yeah, let's use something like this. And the reason why I want to use this odd-looking trapdoor is because I want some transparency, because we're going to add some rocks here later. It's going to give the players a sort of obstacle to overcome in this case. Because it's supposed to be a safety shaft that becomes cluttered. So I'm going to go ahead and find some rocks. Here we go. So I'm just gonna bring a bunch of these in here. And I don't know how much of these I'm going to use, but I'm just getting a bunch of different shapes. Again, all this stuff from Forgotten Adventures, so thanks to them for making my job of making these dungeons look cool quite a bit easier. I'm gonna shrink a bunch of these because I don't want these to be giant boulders. But I definitely want them to be big enough. Maybe they're better. Yeah, they're better as just one square. And we're going to go ahead and just start adding them willy-nilly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put them all up here. Just so they're lined up nicely. And we're going to do a few copy pastes here. That should be good enough. We're going to go ahead and just scatter them about. Probably will need a few more rocks. Yeah, I'm going to want a few more of these. Let's continue. Let's do 3 more. And what I want to do is I want to block this doorway. Here. There you go. Something pretty straightforward, and this will give us an understanding. Let me put some notes here, the GM section, so we understand what we're trying to do here. And we can use this for the write-up, but if I go ahead and add some text in this scenario, we've got cluttered or caved in hallway. This is difficult terrain. Locked, open doorway. This would require DC, let's call it 10 acrobatics to sort of squeeze yourself through the small gaps, and then to clear out passageway takes let me think. Because one thing that I want the players to be able to do here is be able to clear out this passageway so that it's easier for them to get through. Also, for non-acrobatic people, the acrobatic person can come in and then move the rocks out of the way to let the less acrobatic people come in. I'm going to say it's 15 minutes. No, sorry. It's 1 hour divided by your athletics divided by 5. And what that means is, for example, if you get less than 5, let's say floor. If you get less than 5, then no, this is ceiling. Sorry, just using some math terms here. So if you get less than 5, then it's 1 hour divided by 1. It means it takes you an hour to clear this pathway. If you get between 5 and 10, it takes you 30 minutes, then 20 minutes, then 15 minutes. Yeah. And people outside can help for advantage. So this will teach you how advantage works. So going back here, we're dealing with advantage and disadvantage. And we're going to deal with disadvantage when we get to this darkness here. We got this pathway here. This is dim light of faint fluorescent gems. So let me go ahead and find some gems here. This one that's not so strictly cut. That's weird. Let's go to natural decor. Crystal. Let's look for crystals. Oh, I noticed that our chat replay is not fully set up. I should change that. Like I said, a good amount of this is also dealing with the scuff that's involved here. There you go. I accidentally was cropping it. Okay, there we go. Much better. Yeah, let's... What kind of gems would we expect to find here? Let's go with... I like purple. Let's go with purple here. So I'm gonna add some purple here. Oops, these are all in the GM layer. Let me fix that. Here we go. And these should be probably in the front. There you go. What a big cluster here. There you go. And let's say that if they want to mine this, we should consider what they would need. Light requires a pick. DC. Let's call it a 13. And looking at the list of skills, actually, I'm gonna check the tools. This is part of the time where you want to do some research. So what I'm gonna want to do is I'm gonna look at the tools in D&D and see if they see if there's anything specific for mining, because there might be tools. There's a smith's tools, but I don't think that's what they want. I don't think they want mason's tools either. Be prepared to do a fair amount of research. We're setting stuff up here. Mason's tools. Doesn't tell anything here. Ooh, there's a miner's pick. Okay. Requires a miner's pick. And we'll say that it's raw strength. And we're going to need a door here. I'm going to put this door... I'm going to do something a bit more sturdy for the living quarters. Let's go with Something like this. Oops, we're still in GM mode. That's map mode. There we go. I'm gonna make this. Oh geez, I'm still getting used to this keyboard. I'm gonna make this quite a bit smaller than the wall, so it becomes obvious as a door. That looks excellent. And I need a small doorway like this one. There we go. Okay. Do we want to do anything special about this door? Okay. Here's my plan. We're going to go ahead and actually add a combat encounter here. We're going to add a creature who lives in this area and defends it if he hears people coming by. It might not be a combat encounter either. It might be it might just be a way to demonstrate a challenge, or rather a skill contest. So with that in mind, I'm gonna have to create a goblin token or something similar here. I think I'm gonna go with straightforward goblins. Keep it straightforward. Everyone knows goblin. But I'm gonna keep that as a note. What else do we care about here? We're going to want I see. Okay. We're gonna want rails. For our mining cart. Yeah, here we go. Oh no, it's gotta be smaller than that. Nope. Yeah, it should be closer to this. We're gonna want some corners. No, this corner, it's like a too much. It's like a 90-degree turn. Anything else I can do? Yeah, we're gonna make this we're gonna get a really small one. I'm gonna have to handle the curve on our own. Oop, gotta get out of the way so I can get this thing. This should be in the front. There we go. Okay, now we can start using these corners. I need a smaller corner, actually. Is this small enough? It is. This needs to be even smaller for the inside corner. Do I have an even smaller version? No, it's too narrow. Alright, I have an idea. We're gonna go ahead and cheat just a little bit. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna make this much smaller. Like that, and then I'm gonna duplicate it. There we go. Okay. Ah, there we go. I'm in too deep when it comes to dealing with these guardrails. And I know of a better technique to handle all these map elements. I just am in too deep. I'll deal with it later on. Okay, we're finally out of this. Ah. Okay. Now that we've mapped out the this railroad area, we're kind of getting a better idea of how we want to what we might want to do with this passageway, because I see that the railroad has a reason to go through here. Go through the center. So I'll have some food for thought on that. The only thing you notice, of course, is the rocks are under it. So we're kind of messed up on that, but we got a way to fix that. So let me just fix this guy real quick. A little misaligned. That's not what I wanted. Okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take each of these. I'm gonna put them in the back. We're just gonna put them under the. We're just going to put them under our terrain, our floor. But it more importantly puts them behind or under all the rocks that are in the way. And now, oops, now I can just go to all of my pieces of terrain and also go in the back of those. And those mining sections will be back. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Uh-oh. Is there a way to redo? There isn't. Eh. I accidentally moved this thing in the wrong spot. Now I gotta dig this out. Let's put you back here. Alright, get you in the back so that you can be here. Huh. Well, this thing needs to go to the... This thing needs to go to the back. There you go. Okay. There's our terrain. There's our railing, which looks a lot better. I'm going to want to take this and maybe put this a little bit further in the back so it's lined up. And we're going to put a rail stopper here as well. Just got to find meaningful wall. These are all lamps. There we go. Kind of like this one. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna shrink it a little bit. A little too wide. There we go. And then finally we need an actual mining cart. Oops. All right. Now this is what we're talking about. Needs to be a bit bigger than that, but not that much bigger. There you go. We'll add some gems to it. More purple crystals for sure. We use a nice little pool of stuff here. So there's already some valuables in the cart. The adventurers may be enticed to clear out this rocky passage somehow in order to let the minecart through so they can take all this stuff and get it closer to the end. And then we want this area. So we're going to want a few things. We're going to want some lanterns. Don't want wall lanterns. I want, yeah, something like this. Definitely too big. There you go. And this lantern is going to be settled right here. We're going to want like a camping bag. And we'll pick this gross looking one. Like this. We're going to make another lantern that covers the door. What else? We're gonna want a stairwell here. I want some stony stairs. And why don't we take some corner stairs here? I put a spiral staircase here as a basis, but it's not at all necessary. So do something like this. No, those stairs are going up. there a version of these stairs that are going down? Ah. Yeah, we're going to want a wall here. And I think these things should be in the front. You did not fit up in the front. There we go. Done. And I'm going to go ahead and take these stairs and I'm going to stretch them out just a little bit. Whoops. There we go. Need this to be in the front. There we go. Give her a stairwell. We have 2 lanterns here that will provide the bright light. We are probably going to have a goblin here with some conditions to maybe provide a way for the heroes to get a pick, a miner's pick, as well as potentially a combat or a contested role to teach those features. So let's finish. The last thing we need is to set up this room. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break while I continue to brainstorm what we're going to do with this catacomb, with this trap nonsense. They still haven't quite figured that out yet. But I'll be right back. We're going to do 5-minute break. Catch you guys then. Greetings again. We are back. Switching right back to our D&D. Switching right back to our map. I've had a little bit of time to think about this, and what I want to do is I want to go back to what we're planning to cover in this floor, and I think there's going to be some things we're going to have to put out and save for other floors because we don't have a whole lot left in our dungeon. We're keeping it simple. We're keeping it smaller for today, for this first floor. And so we're going to take a look at what we have here. And, oh, getting some errors on voice mod. Anyway, so probably what we want to do is we want to remove some of the things we want to force in terms of traveling and character maintenance. So we may see some rest, we may see some downtime. We're probably not going to see any of this because probably the character's not going to get hurt here. I think I'm going to include maybe falling. We're going to see if we can include this, but I'm not going to include suffocation or drowning. We're not going to do this at all. Because I just don't have any room to put any place where you would suffocate or drown. Maybe there will be a social interaction here, but probably not. What are we going to include? We're gonna try to include the saving throws, and I'm gonna do that using the graves and stuff here. We're not going to include any proficiency checks for armor and weapons unless the enemies really want to force combat. But the combat will be very straightforward. I don't think they're going to take any damage. I'm going to try to include the skill contest with that goblin at the end. And we're not going to include anything about trying to focus on specifics, theming on abilities and skills. So we're focusing on getting our skill contest in, getting our saving throw in, and perhaps getting potentially some features of environmental hazards, especially when it comes to falling damage. So how are we going to do that? First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change up how the graves are going to work. So instead of putting them on the edge, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and have the minecart. I'm going to go into my overlay to draw this out. I'm going to have my minecart continue, and it's probably going to go along this path that we see here until it eventually hits this corner. I want this corner to matter for something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some graves here. And then here, I want to have a hole. And so the risk here is that if the characters can't see, if the characters aren't careful, the mining cart might fall into this hole. And if a character is not careful, they may end up falling into this hole, which might require a dexterity saving throw and take falling damage. Or they might dig up some of these soft pieces of soil, not knowing that it's a grave, and may require some constitution saving throw if they want to avoid getting sick, if they see remains or something of that nature. So that's sort of what the goal is here. This is going to be mostly free space on these sections, and we're gonna remove the sort of trapped section. We're not trapping these sarcophagi, and we're gonna do more basic burials here. So to set that up, what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna continue this rail cart. I'll put this here. And what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to try to make this a bit more winding. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do some rail. I'm going to add some of these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like this. And then I could do something like this. You see what I'm trying to do here? And what I'll do is I'll put something like this. This goes to the back. This goes to the back. This goes to the back. That went to the front. I want it to go to the back. There we go. So then this would cover up this railing, but not this railing. Oh shoot, I'm realizing that it's gonna be a little bit harder to do that here. Oh, there we go. There we go, we'll cheat a little bit. This needs to be a bit bigger. There we go. That looks okay. Oh, it's around this point that we are going to consider that this curve. Get this guy in here. It's going to curve this way. It needs to be a bit shorter. This, yeah, needs a slightly longer. And then this gets straight and into the hole. It's something like this. Let's add the holes. You think so? This is using a lot of the assets that I pulled. It took a lot of overhead work to get all these things, but it really does help. Although it's definitely not necessary, Major. I've seen a lot of people run very successful games that just they just draw on the map with pen and paper, or they make the map it's all theater of the mind. I like to try to keep a little bit of detail on the map. I'm definitely doing a little bit more than I normally do, I'll fully admit, if I'm doing like there's a casual game with friends. But this is just helping to demonstrate like the techniques you could do in order to improve a particular map. I just want a pit. I don't want a manhole. Give me a pit. This is supposed to be like a grave that hasn't been fully dug out yet. Really? They don't have a pit? Here we go. This is what I want. Alright, so here's big grave hole with dirt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my tint. I'm going to make it black so that it looks even darker than it normally is. I'm going to remove my GM stuff so you get a better look at what it's actually going to look like when it's done. So this is your big hole. And that's some text to it so we know what the heck's going on here. Oops. So if you think the next time I play I need to spend more time checking out the surroundings, it is valuable. There is a valid stereotype about rolling perception and investigation everywhere you go, because if your DM puts a lot of effort on the map, they're gonna really appreciate and typically reward you for exploring the world, for exploring the area. Damage, DC 10 reflex, or not the reflex. Sorry, I'm still in older D&D mode. It's based on your abilities now. So dexterity, saving throw. So if you accidentally go into the hole, DC 10 dexterity saving throw, and you might take D6 damage. It's also DC 12 athletics check to climb out. I'll put that here. Okay, I'm going to remove some of these things that are no longer needed because the maps are actually pretty... The map is starting to get nicely fleshed out. Clutter cave in the hallway. We do not need this anymore. Oops. Is this token? Only thing I really checked out in the last session was small campfires. And there were some other hints to stuff that I'm thinking about now that I never explored. Don't beat yourself up about it too much. It's all a matter of play style. If you're interested, I would recommend looking up the what do they call it? some creators of D&D did some articles on how players could typically be separated into separate categories that help indicate the kind of playstyle they'll typically go for. We'll go for this here just to help with notes. There you go. And reading that helps. Reading that is very useful for both players and DMs. For DMs, it's going to help give you an idea for the kind of players you think you're going to be dealing with and what typically will make them happy and what they'll like to focus on. And for players, it just gives you a lot of good awareness. It sorts them into like player types based on their player styles. Like, let me see if I can look it up. But if you ever heard of like whether someone's a Slayer type or a power gamer type, those are based on some studies and articles that were written from people who made tabletop RPGs and like D&D and stuff. Let me see. Yeah. So if you look at this dichotomy, I'm actually gonna post it. I found a reasonable link on TV tropes. So you just look at that and look at the Dungeons and Dragons section. It actually lists a quick overview of the type of players. The Dungeon Master's Guide for 4th edition identifies 8 player types: actor, explorer, instigator, power gamer, slayer, storyteller, thinker, and watcher. And it's worth looking into these and maybe identifying what kind of player you are and what kind of players you would like to cater to if you're a DM, or you would like to help express or explore as a player to help, like further your enjoyment of the game. Excuse me, your enjoyment of the game. So I highly recommend that. It's good reading. We still need to create these graves. Not a diet grave, a dirt grave. We're going to use this as our basis. Oops, we're still in GM mode. Let's move that to map mode. Yeah, I want to make sure I pick something that is significantly different from the map or from the hole itself. There we go. We can get rid of these icons. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. If you dig up a grave, I'm gonna say it's a fairly simple saving throw. DC 6 Constitution check for saving throw. Or let's see. What condition would be fitting? Now we could do is you can always go to Google and look up some rules on D&D, some good resources. I'm gonna look at the conditions that are available. I am pretty sure I might go with poisoned. Although poison seems a little on the nose, I'm gonna see if there's a better version of it, or a softer version of it. There is not. I'm gonna go ahead and say poisoned. But I'm gonna make the duration very small. Poison for 1 minute. You just feel sick for a little while. I really want to. Let me make this white. Oh, it's so much easier to read. I'm gonna make all this white now. Lanterns. Not sure what type of role I would be. Maybe a slayer right now. I think I'll be more an instigator as time goes on. I've definitely had my fair share of instigators. They are they're such a double-edged sword. I would never fault anyone for being any particular kind of player, but as a DM, you definitely get the most frustrating moments, but also the best stories from instigators at your table. Let's go ahead and remove this because I'm just going to go ahead and put that here. Right, Lance. Okay. Goblin inside wakes up if players clear out the boulder above. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead behind the scenes. I'm looking for my monster tokens. I'm going to see if I can find if I have a goblin already set up. That would be very, very neat. Let's see. Do I have such a token available? Let's see. No, I do not have a goblin. Gotta make one. This will be pretty straightforward. You can look up lots of different ways to create tokens online. But I'm just going to go ahead and look for a nondescript goblin image. Sure, let's grab this. I know you're not really seeing a whole lot in the background, but I'm just moving ahead and making the token right now. Something real quick and easy. We add it in. There we go. And then again, there are a lot of free sources. If you have the monster manual, you can easily look up what the stats of a goblin would be. Goblins are small, which means they should be relatively smaller than, be about half the size of your normal token. It would be here. Let's put this guy in the token layer. Let's add his stats. So what I like to do is I like to take the full stat block and just add it in my GM notes. So I could always reference the full stat block if I need to. And then in these 3 slots, I'll usually put in the hit points of a goblin, is 7. Then the armor class is 15. And then typically what their attack bonus is for whatever weapons they're using. So this time it would be a 4. And what I'm going to do with this goblin right now is I'm going to go ahead and look at the weapons in 5e, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this goblin a different weapon. So if we look at the GM stats, we see that he typically has a scimitar and a short bow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the short bow. He won't have the short bow in this scenario. And instead, I'm going to give him a pickaxe. But the idea being that if you could defeat the goblin or convince him to give you the pickaxe, a war pick, there we go. Then you could use that pick to deal with the. You could deal with that pick. Huh. That's weird. This thing is not giving me the full thing. Okay, it's still +4 to hit. Reach 5 feet. 1 target. And on a hit, it's going to do how much damage? It's based on a D8, which is the war pick. So that's going to be D8 plus 2 piercing damage. Which is usually, that is, I believe, supposed to be, isn't that supposed to be 6 damage? And that's instead of the scimitar. So get rid of the scimitar. There you go. And I'm going to go ahead and just fix some of these. There we go. Now you get a better look at the stats here. Perfect. And so now he has the pickaxe that we need. And it's fairly straightforward to update monsters like that, as long as you can see, you know, what you need to change. So for example, I just gave him a war pick, and I know what a war pick looks like by looking up what the damage dice is on a war pick. You just change the damage appropriately here. And this 6 is just an average damage. So if you roll an 8-sided die, you get an average of 4.5 damage. You round it down to an average of 4, plus 2 is 6. That's why I get the 6 damage here. In case you don't feel like rolling your dice, you can just take the average here. Great. So now the goblin's here. We got this here. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and add a few more, I think, purple crystals here. Just 1 or 2 that are just littered around the area. Like here. And here. Not nearly this big, but something in the corner that might be out of sight to the goblin, or that goblin might not have noticed, but a player might just pick it up. Not wedged to the wall, doesn't require the pick, it's just there. just to give the room a little bit more, because the room right now is fairly empty. Maybe we put a pot here. These are all like clay pots. I'm looking for a cooking pot. Yeah, something like this. And then we'll put a fire under it. And we'll say that there are embers in this. Oh, these are all in the token sections. Put these in the map. Oops. There we go. This goes to front. Something like this. And actually, we're going to take these. We're going to move it a bit closer to the goblin. Cool. And what's worth noting, I'm going to make some extra steps here to just make it a bit easier to read or remember certain things. So we know this. Wake up at players. Contest with, and we can check the goblin's skills here. So a goblin has a strength of 8. Oh, really? They have a strength of 8 and dexterity of 14, which means that their pick is actually very weak. They should only have a +1 to hit and should do d8 -1 damage, which is fine because this goblin's not really meant to fight. He runs away the first chance he gets. So the strength is 8, and he has no special skills except for stealth. So that means that you would contest with a d20 -1 athletics. So if someone else, so what that would mean, for example, is let's say, you know, the adventuring team comes in through and they start digging out rocks to make a pathway for the other players to come in without needing an acrobatics checks to squeeze through. That sound would alert this goblin, who would then try to come in here and bar the door. And when that happens and someone tries to force the door open, it would cause a skill contest. The player would roll a d20 plus whatever their athletics is, and the goblin would roll a d20 plus their athletics, which in this case would be a d20 -1. And if the player beats the goblin, then the player would be able to force the door open, then reveal the goblin, and then a fight would start, presumably. And so that's what this means, and it's just a way for us to easily remember what the goblin's athletic score is. We're just making notes here. Okay. Put a few more things here so I can easily read what's going on here. There you go. Let's get rid of this dead guy because we don't need him anymore. This is just a reference for tokens. Okay. So we kind of have a starting first map here. It's a little bit on the bare side, just because of it's the first floor and we're just doing some introductory stuff right now. But if we imagine what we're looking at the players coming in through the main entrance with a big keep out sign. This demonstrates the first obstacle, which shows how any roll is going to work. They could either do an ability check, which is a strength check here, Or they can do, if needed, they can augment any ability check with the use of a skill, such as investigation here, in order to find the key under the mat, or with the use of a tool, for example, the thieves' tools, in order to pick the lock. So they would be able to understand that from here. Then, moving around, they may end up falling into this trap or using some implement that they have in order to dig through. That may cause a Constitution saving throw or some other saving throw. So they'll be able to see how a saving throw works. And they may or may not take damage. They may or may not need an athletics check to climb out. They can see how falling damage works. Falling damage typically is a d6 for every 10 feet of every 10 feet that you fall. Then they can understand how difficult terrain works here, because they'll be going through this big rocky outcrop. That's not what I wanted. Difficult terrain basically making you move half as quickly as you normally would under any other circumstance. Then they have another acrobatics check to get through this passageway. So they would be able to see a dexterity check in thieves' tools, an intelligence check and investigation, a strength check here, as well as dexterity and a saving throw, and dexterity and acrobatics, as well as a constitution saving throw here. They'll also, of course, have the opportunity to use a wisdom check if they're ever using perception to check anything. So wisdom would be what they need to perceive things. Actually, we can make a note of that here, just so that we can sort of cover every major skill or every major ability listed here. So, for example, if we were to add text in here, this would be mining entrance, darkness, DC 5 perception to spot the graves and hole. DC 10 plus disadvantage. Oh wait, yeah. If low light, DC 5 perception to spot the graves in the hole. If darkness, DC plus disadvantage. So, this means that, let's say, these guys come in and they just don't have any light at all. Then they are stumbling around in the dark. They can only really see the walls. And they would need a DC 10 perception check. And they would be at disadvantage to make that check in order to see what they need to see, which would be the graves here and the hole here. Make sure they don't stumble into it. In that scenario, in this scenario, just keep in mind, disadvantage basically means that you're rolling twice and taking the worst result, and advantage means you're rolling twice and taking the better result. If you have dim light, for example, let's say you have dark vision, and so you can see in darkness as though it was dim light, then it's just a DC 5 perception check to spot the graves in the hole, which is super easy. And if you're in bright light, if you take a torch and you light it up, then it's automatic. You just see what happens. So you don't have to make any check at that point. If I check here, yeah, that holds about right. So that's our perception check. And then here, we will have another contest. Contest to cause a goblin to stop fleeing if you were in combat. If in combat would be a contest insight, which for the goblin would be, let's look at their wisdom. It's also -1 and they have no particular skills. So once again, that would be a that would be D20 -1 versus the PC's persuasion or intimidation. And then you could make up your own sort of design on, who is this goblin, what's their goblin's name. You can design a personality for there. But there we go. We've now have a dungeon floor that sort of covers a lot of the basics. It covers just how general skills work, how general roles work. You basically will take an ability score, and then you may or may not add an appropriate skill or tool proficiency to it, which also teaches you how proficiencies work. We've done that for strength, as well as dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, constitution, and finally charisma here. We've demonstrated how some maneuvering works, difficult terrain. We can do timing situations. If you're taking a long time, players might use that opportunity to take a short rest. People can use help actions for advantage. And we'll talk about the actual combat actions that are available probably in our second floor, where we're going to have, I think, a lot more, we're going to have, I think, a lot more combat. And we've got our mining operations, which I think it will give you an understanding of, how to use certain weapons and things like that. In fact, I'm actually going to make a note here. Advantage if proficient with the war pick. Is there anything else that's similar to a war pick that I should consider? No, advantage if proficient with war pick. So if you're proficient with the war pick, you get advantage on mining this materials here, which is also pretty good. I'll also put that here. Then you get to see how, showing opportunities to get disadvantage or advantage and how those situations might help. And that, I think, about does it. We're pretty good on this. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I'm going to start up Fog of War. There we go. And what you'll want to do, for example, is, where your heroes are going to start, you just reveal that area. So they're going to start here. And then, as you go ahead, if they have, for example, darkness, you might only reveal the walls that they're in. Or you might hide certain things. So, for example, if you, what you might do actually is you might take these items, you might put these in the GM layer, and you only put these in the map layer when appropriate, like if a player passes the perception check and such. So we could do something like that. And then you're just going to reveal the areas as the players go on, keeping in mind of their sight range and all that stuff. And you're only going to want to reveal what is relevant. Like, you won't reveal this stuff here that I did. You can do polygon reveal, for example. If you want to reveal this area, you can do something like this. So that, for example, reveals precisely the area you would want to reveal in that scenario. And then you can always re-hide them. And a lot of this stuff is going to be just a matter of getting used to the tools at your disposal on whatever website you happen to be playing D&D on. And it's features like this that really that really help me to use, sites like this instead of say Tabletop Simulator, where a lot of that stuff is manual, which is of course totally fine. People will play using Theater of the Mind and any sort of dice roller. But if you're interested in DMing, this is an example of why you might want to use software like this. And we're pretty good. This is a complete floor. It'll be pretty quick. Your players will probably go through this in a matter of like an hour at least, or at most. So it definitely is not what you would base an entire adventure in, but we're done, and we only did it in a few hours. So let's just go ahead and double check our checklist. So we've got ability checks, we've got skills checks, we managed to get saving throws in. We've done proficiency. We have tested that for weapons and tools. We're checking weapons because of our war pick check here. But we haven't really checked it for armor, so we're going to list that later. We've handled advantages and disadvantages. We've done skill contests. We've kind of talked about this just by checking the very different kinds of abilities, but not really a whole lot else. We haven't done anything on travel pace time. We haven't really done anything on character maintenance. We've got some environmental hazards from falling, and we've done a review on vision and light. There's some basics of social interactions, but we haven't really done anything as far as the NPC's attitude and such. And we haven't done combat. So this kind of stuff here, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to see if we can tackle these in the second and third floors. Because we're going to want to introduce these features to the players later on as well. And as well, you know, we want to maybe be talking about other skills that haven't been talked about here, like you know, your survival skill or your medicine and things like that. That kind of goes under character maintenance as well. But we're done with this. So what I might do in the future, if I make appropriate polls, this will maybe be on my Twitter, is I'll set up polls that will or surveys for anyone who's interested in seeing certain themes or certain mechanisms or certain ideas implemented in future floors. Because I'm planning to do 100 of these. It's going to take a long time to get through all of them. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities to explore with concepts that, you know, even I'm not really thinking of at the moment. But if you enjoyed watching, if this gave you any sort of insight on, you know, how to make a map, how to design an encounter, how to design certain challenges and stuff, then that's good. That's sort of the goal of this series, if you can call it that. But I'm going to go ahead and put it away for today. Thanks for watching, everyone who did watch. And next time we're going to be covering the second floor, which is going to be probably mostly combat. Bye-bye!